Thousands of residents flock to food fair and cinemas under the Happy Hong Kong campaign. Mainland tourists flood Hong Kong streets as Golden Week starts. And health expert says COVID and flu season have not yet peaked. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Today marks the first day of the Labor Day Golden Week for the mainland, and thousands of tourists have come to visit Hong Kong. Today is also the start of the Happy Hong Kong Food Fair at the Convention and Exhibition Center in Wan Chai. Thousands flock to the venue hoping to get a taste of delicious local and Western cuisine. Veronica Lin has our top story.
Dumplings, beef balls, and white boiled shrimps. These are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the variety of snacks and dishes offered at the Gourmet Food Fair. As early as 9 a.m., residents were queuing outside the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center, hoping to have first dibs on all the delicacies on show. Ms. Chung said she just had some pineapple buns and plans to buy a pack of popcorn next. She hopes the government will organize more events like this to improve people's moods. Armed with 3 recycled bags, this brother and sister duo said they are planning to spend around $1,000 at the fair. But they said the size of the fair was smaller than expected. Financial Secretary Paul Chan also joined in on the fun, making signature Hong Kong street food such as egg waffles and milk tea. This is so smooth and delicious, he said. While most visitors were local residents, a few expats also came along, including this Italian chef who said he's thrilled to see the venue being filled with people, especially after 3 years of the pandemic.
We want to show what cuisine we can do, a little bit different, Italian, and also can be fusion, with for Hong Kong taste. It's not about profit. The important thing is to make an impact to the people. So people can have a taste of some of our food and also can come there in the restaurant. It's like an advertising.
Apart from local delights, residents can also enjoy fresh food from around the world, such as this Italian bread focaccia topped with smoked salmon, guacamole, and smoked duck breast. Veronica Lin, TVB News.
Also part of the Happy Hong Kong campaign is Cinema Day. Today, moviegoers can watch films at a discounted price of $30 per ticket. Even residents who haven't seen a film in years flock to the cinema thanks to these discounted tickets. Even IMAX tickets to see Hollywood blockbusters at the MCL cinemas are just $30 each, $170 less than the original price. Most cinemas had a full house for almost all films. However, some residents were unable to get tickets due to previous website crashes and long queues. The tourism sector expects some 600,000 mainlanders will travel to the city over the Golden Week. By 4 p.m. today, over 210,000 people had entered the city via different checkpoints. Mimosa Ngai tells us more.
This was Canton Road in Tsim Sha Tsui earlier today, and it was packed with people. The same scene appeared at the Star Avenue and on Nathan Road in Mong Kok. For the first 5-day Golden Week in the mainland after the pandemic, many mainlanders decided to visit Hong Kong. For some, shopping at local pharmacy is a must. For others, luxury products are more attractive. This man, who came from Hubei, said he hopes to buy some souvenirs for his family, such as bags and makeup products. He added the Victoria Harbour is also on his must-see list. This woman said this is her first visit to Hong Kong, adding it has been a long time since she last travelled. Shopping makes one hungry. However, it was not easy to get a table. This woman said her queuing number is 900 and something, and she needs to wait for about 300 tables to finish dining before being admitted. Some restaurants decided to introduce promotions and discounts through mainland online platforms. This Japanese restaurant owner says such promotion strategies are effective as he has received more bookings for the Golden Week. Speaking on a radio program, chairman of the Travel Industry Council, Gianna Choi, said only 68 mainland tour groups traveled to the city today, fewer than the pre-pandemic period. She said tourists traveled differently nowadays as they tend to visit hidden spots introduced by YouTubers, places that are not found on the traditional travel itinerary of tour groups. As mainlanders decide to cross the border for Hong Kong, many local residents are traveling to the mainland to spend their 3-day holiday via the local control point. For instance, this man plans to visit his cousin. According to statistics, about 39,000 people crossed the border via local to Hong Kong by 4 p.m. on Saturday, while over 50,000 travelers left the city for the mainland. Ming Mo-Sanai, TVB News.
Over the 5-day May Day holiday, a total of 240 million mainlanders are expected to travel across China. On the first day of the Golden Week, many Guangzhou residents arrived at the Guangzhou South train station with suitcases and children. In Beijing, reservation slots for the famous tourist attraction Temple of Heaven are already fully booked. A staff member held up a sign saying tickets are fully reserved for today. Beijing authorities expect the capital will receive 8.8 million tourists over the holiday period, up 3% from 2019. More people in the city have been suffering from COVID and flu recently. But government advisor Professor Ivan Hung said the number of new COVID and flu cases have yet to peak. He predicts that flu cases will peak in a week or two, while COVID cases will take another 7 to 8 weeks. Veronica Lin reports.
It is now the peak season for influenza. In the past week alone, 28 died from flu, while 2 children developed shock and encephalopathy after contracting the virus. COVID is also making a comeback, with the number of lab-tested positive results rising since mid-March. Government pandemic advisor and infectious disease expert Professor Ivan Hung said neither has reached its peak. Hung suggested that herd immunity in the city is relatively weak. He said influenza A and B do not mutate too much, while it will take COVID longer to reach its peak, an estimated 7 to 8 weeks. Cases of the new COVID subvariant Arcturus has seen a sharp increase in the U.S. in recent months, becoming the second most dominant strain. Hung said it's possible that cases of the strain would increase in Hong Kong as well. Hung said that so far there have been sporadic cases of Arcturus in the city, which is known to be more contagious than other subvariants. But its level of harm is similar to the other strains. He pointed out that Arcturus is more likely to cause eye inflammation, but once recovered, these symptoms will also disappear. He recommended that the public should consult a doctor as soon as possible if they have eye inflammation to determine whether it's caused by COVID or bacteria. Veronica Lin, TVB News.
The amended copyright ordinance will take effect from May 1st. The aim of the amendment is to strengthen copyright protection in the digital environment. The Customs and Excise Department said people who harm the economic benefits of copyright owners will need to face criminal sanctions. Nowadays, set-top boxes or cable boxes can be bought easily, enabling users to watch global TV contents. However, the newly amended copyright ordinance introduces an exclusive technology-neutral communication right for copyright owners. This means individuals who violate the right will face criminal sanctions. The maximum penalty can be a 4-year jail term and a fine of $50,000 for each infringement. Chief Executive John Lee said Hong Kong aims to halve its carbon emissions volume by 2035 and reach carbon neutrality by 2050. Lee made the remarks at the opening ceremony of Tree Planting Day, which was held after a 3-year break due to the pandemic. Lee said Hong Kong is actively promoting green economy, sustainable finance, and green bonds, and these green developments will play a part in tackling global climate change. Over 2,000 people, with nearly half of them being PLA soldiers, participated in Tree Planting Day. They planted 8,000 tree seedlings. China and North Korea have criticized the so-called Washington Declaration, which is a security agreement between Washington and Seoul, released on Wednesday during South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to the U.S. Daniel Rao tells us more.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol wrapped up his US trip on Friday with a visit to Massachusetts. There he met the state's governor and gave a talk at Harvard University. High on the agenda of his trip were tensions between North and South Korea. On Wednesday, the United States pledged to give South Korea more insight into its nuclear planning. Seoul promised not to seek nuclear weapons itself in an agreement both sides said was aimed at North Korea and its growing nuclear weapons program. Subsequently, China's Department of Asian Affairs Director General Liu Jin-song met with South Korean Embassy Minister Kang Sang-wook in Beijing to express China's strong dissatisfaction with the declaration. This according to a statement on the website of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Liu reportedly stressed China's stance on various issues, including the Taiwan issue. He urged South Korea to strictly adhere to the One China principle. During his visit to the US, South Korea's leader held talks with US President Joe Biden on various issues, including tensions in the Taiwan Strait. Meanwhile, North Korea's Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of the country's leader Kim Jong-un, also commented on the US-South Korea agreement. Kim said North Korea is convinced it must further perfect a nuclear war deterrent as a result of the declaration. Kim's statement is North Korea's first comment on the meeting. It appears to suggest that Pyongyang will continue to develop its weapons arsenal. Kim also criticized US President Joe Biden for his warning that any nuclear attack against the US and its allies will result in the end of the regime. She called Biden's warning a nonsensical remark while labeling South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol a fool. Daniel Rell, TVB News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has issued a detailed assessment of its failure to identify problems and push for fixes at Silicon Valley Bank before its collapse. The Fed promised tougher supervision and stricter rules for banks. In a 114-page report, the Fed said its oversight of SVB was inadequate and that regulatory standards were too low. At the time of its failure, SVB had 31 unaddressed citations on its safety and soundness, triple what its peers in the banking sector had, the report said. The Fed added that supervisors of SVB did not fully appreciate the problems, delaying their responses to gather more evidence even as weaknesses mounted. On March 10th, regulators shut SVB after customers withdrew $42 billion on the previous day. And more customers requested another $100 billion the following morning. Coming up after the break, hundreds of Chinese arrived in Beijing after evacuating from Sudan. Pope Francis continues tour of Hungary. Devastation in Ukraine after Russian attack. Welcome back. The first flight of Chinese nationals evacuated from war-gripped Sudan arrived in Beijing Saturday morning. This as the sounds of airstrikes, anti-aircraft weaponry and artillery could be heard in Khartoum today as fighting in Sudan enters a third week. And hospitals are struggling with a lack of resources as a humanitarian crisis grows. Tracy Furness has more.
The first temporary flight with 343 Chinese nationals on board touched down in Beijing on Saturday, returning home via Saudi Arabia after they were evacuated from war-torn Sudan. Before boarding the flight in Saudi Arabia, this evacuee described the scene in Sudan. During our evacuation journey in Sudan, we could hear continuous gunshots, and there was thick smoke billowing from shelling behind our buses, he said. The People's Liberation Army Navy vessels took nearly 700 Chinese evacuees from Port Sudan to Jeddah, while others left Sudan overland to neighboring countries like Ethiopia, Egypt and Eritrea. Meanwhile, smoke was seen rising into the sky above Khartoum on Friday as strikes by air, tanks and artillery rocked Sudan's capital and adjacent city Bari. Mocking a 72-hour truce extension announced by the army and a rival paramilitary force, the airstrikes continued into Saturday. This is medical staff are saying there is a lack of resources in hospitals as they struggle to deal with the influx of patients. This doctor, speaking from Al Now Hospital in Omdurman, says there is a lack of doctors with only 1 or 2 available to cover several departments in one shift, and there is a huge lack of hospital facilities. An aid worker with the International Committee of the Red Cross warned of a humanitarian crisis in Sudan.
Pope Francis met with children from a school for the blind on Saturday during the second day of his visit to the Hungarian capital. Crowds gathered later at St. Elizabeth of Hungary Church in Budapest, where the Pope met with refugees. He will then meet with young people at Budapest Sports Arena. The Pontiff also took in the sights of the city with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and President Katalin Novak Friday. This is the Pope's first trip since he was admitted to hospital in March for bronchitis. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky used his evening address to send condolences to the family of a mother and daughter killed in Russian strikes in Dnipro. He said only absolute evil can commit such terror against Ukraine. The attacks came days after Zelensky said he and Chinese President Xi Jinping held a long and meaningful phone call, where Xi said China will send a peace envoy to Ukraine and other nations. This report from NBC News.
Tonight, a frantic search for survivors after a barrage of deadly Russian airstrikes. Rescuers combing through smoldering concrete and metal. It is all that's left of an apartment building in Umman after a missile hit in the middle of the night. Residents were fast asleep. Marina telling us she lives nearby and rushed over to help.
Is anywhere in Ukraine safe?
Nowhere. I moved a lot since the war started, and nowhere is safe.
Among the dead, at least 4 children. People here are overwhelmed with emotion. The safety of a home shattered by Russia's war again.
Russia claims they were targeting military-related spaces, but you look at the people here, the little ones included, and you realize what a residential part of the city this is. These are apartment buildings all around. This one, the apartment building that was hit the hardest, people who live here say this side of the building, that's where most of the bedrooms were.
These were the first large-scale Russian missile strikes in nearly 2 months, hitting several cities. A strike in Dnipro killed a toddler and her mother. In Kyiv, a child was injured. Back in Umman, we met Daria, a 20-year-old volunteer.
The most heartbreaking part was like the loud cries of women. I saw the man who was crying because he's the only one who's still alive of his family.
Britain's Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate, are celebrating their 12th wedding anniversary today. On April 29, 2011, more than 1 million people took to the streets of London to watch the ceremony as a worldwide audience of over 2 billion tuned in to the royal occasion. William and Kate met at St Andrews University in Scotland in 2001, when the eldest grandson of Queen Elizabeth arrived to begin a 4-year degree course on the history of art. The pair graduated together in June 2005. In November 2010, after nearly a decade of courtship, Kate and William announced their engagement. The couple have 3 children together, sons Princess George and Louis and daughter Princess Charlotte. They celebrate their 12th wedding anniversary ahead of the coronation of William's father, King Charles, on May 6. Back locally, Chief Executive John Lee officiated the 100th anniversary celebration of Hong Kong Ferry. The company said its harbor cruise Bohemia trips for the May Day holidays have been 80% sold out. The cruises run every night for tourists to soak in the sights and sounds along Victoria Harbour. Hong Kong Ferry also said its business has recovered to the levels before the pandemic, and it needs to deploy more manpower to cope with the demand. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.